If you feel like Sony just screwed you over again by announcing they are stopping physical game production in 2028, you only have yourselves to blame. We gamers put ourselves in the line of fire the moment we started buying digital versions more often. Now suddenly the whole internet is howling about Sony killing off physical media, screaming that this is some sort of digital dystopia. It looks like consumers don't even know what they want. But the real issue behind this outrage is that buyers are being stripped of their fundamental right to choose the option to buy a game digitally or on a physical disc. At the end of the day, for me personally, buying a disc is the only way to actually feel the pixels in my hands, to know it's not just some intangible code but a real physical object. For the business though, this isn't just about tightening the screws. They are trying with all their might to maximize profits. They are doing everything possible to minimize the production cost of the next-gen consoles. The console industry knows the global economic climate is looking grim. Against this backdrop, we're going to see even more unpleasant news about the future of consoles and games. We're in the middle of shitstorm and frankly the forecast is pure garbage. Hardware manufacturers understand that producing next-gen systems is going to be incredibly expensive. More than likely, we won't see disk drives in future consoles at all. It's not just PlayStation. Rumors are already swirling that Microsoft's upcoming Helix console will also ditch the disk drive. All of this is aimed at one simple goal: saving on manufacturing costs. Just rip that extra hardware block out of the console and squeeze out maximum profit. Sony also fully realized that killing physical copies inflates their bottom line. It gives them total control over game distribution. No more reselling on eBay. 100% of revenue flows directly to Sony. Yet, way back in 2013, during the PS4 presentation, Sony openly trolled Xbox for their DRM policies and always online requirements, casually demonstrating how you could just hand a physical game to a friend. They were so aggressively consumer-friendly back then that it feels completely surreal today. It's hard to believe we lived in an era where console makers could run such bold marketing openly, mocking their corporate rivals with genuine humor. Unfortunately, reality hits hard. According to Sony's own financial reports, 85% of game sales are now digital, leaving only 15% for physical retail. And that's not even mentioning the rest of the industry, particularly the PC market, where Steam has pushed digital sales over 19%, if not a full 100%. Meanwhile, to cover their tracks, Sony claims you'll still be able to buy physical copies at retail. They're just going to sell you a dead piece of plastic with a downloaded code inside, legally covering their own asses. Their ultimate trump card is the data shown an almost unconditional transition to digital media. In any potential legal battle, this statistic will be their primary defense. Now the big picture is starting to come into sharp focus. Sony's dynamic pricing strategy makes perfect sense now. Kill physical discs, herd everyone into a digital camp where the end user only gets a revocable license that can be snatched away at any second with zero refunds, and raking cash from direct storefront sales, forcing people to pay whatever arbitrary price they decide to set. And this is where Stop Killing Games initiative plays a crucial role. True, it hasn't become law just yet. Severe roadblocks were thrown in its way. But from what I understand, the next attempt to push this initiative into legislation will be much more organized and forceful. When that happens, it's going to put Sony and likely Xbox, Nintendo, and any publisher who hides behind digital sales stats to seize total control and maximize income in a highly uncomfortable position. Corporate executives don't know how to react in this economic situation and are just making impulsive short-term moves. They don't have the luxury of long-term planning because stalling will cost big business massive losses, especially with the bloated dev cycles of modern AAA titles. Looking at all this, it might seem like we're living in the worst possible timeline. The economy is bleeding and its impact on the gaming industry makes it feel like things will only get worse. But here's the paradox. We are actually living in the absolute best era for gaming. Never before have games been this accessible, and never have we had such an overwhelming variety of things to play. And look, massive AAA projects take years to develop, cost a fortune, and demand maximum profit just to break even. Otherwise, the effective managers will butcher the studio or shut it down entirely. Against this backdrop, smaller independent studios creating AA level projects hit the perfect balance. They are agile. This allows them to work on a game, release it, and turn enough of a profit to survive and make the next one. And we're seeing plenty of examples right now. Ironically, Doom, even though it belongs to Microsoft and id Software, isn't truly indie. was one of the games that reinvented the gameplay formula, because the majority of games had become these overly cinematic blockbuster slugs, and we were constantly suffocated by this AAA degeneration with yellow paint smeared on walls, treating the players like an absolute idiot. That became the staple of big AAA projects. Meanwhile, titles like Doom, Witchfire, the upcoming Guns of Asheton, Chronos the New Dawn, or Fatekeeper are completely hyper-focused on raw gameplay. They don't hold your hand when you fail. It's entirely on the player to learn the mechanics and beat the game. This immediately weeds out the casual crowd. Because the scale of these games is smaller and they cheaper to produce, they don't waste budget on giant cinematic cutscenes, expensive mocap, and endless dialogue. They pour everything into gameplay, which is exactly why they can turn a profit. The core audience that plays these games is more than enough. Right now, in the near future, and probably in the medium term, games like this will be the main driving force of the industry. Their only real issue is the lack of marketing budget. They just can't afford to constantly remind you they exist. Fatekeeper is one of those games, and for a whole year I basically forgot it was in development, until I accidentally stumbled across its early access page on Steam. I downloaded, and a full playthrough takes roughly 2 hours since it's in early access, and the story will be expanded later. But man, I've missed this kind of sandbox combat. The fighting is incredibly straightforward. You have a light attack, you have a heavy attack, you have a kick, and honestly, this is one of the best features in the game. I just had a blast kicking enemies off cliffs. You have the ability to combine spells with the environment. This is another awesome feature that massively expands the gameplay loop, something you rarely see in AAA titles that are heavily scripted and just drag you around on a leash. You can use telekinesis to drop barrels on enemies or ignite a bottle of oil to set them on fire. For me, this demo felt like a damn amusement park. The game does an incredible job of pulling you into its atmosphere, giving me a feeling I probably haven't had since Dishonored 2 or Cyberpunk. It's also a deeply nostalgic experience. Sure, it didn't have that classic Dark Messiah of Might and Magic feature where you could cast ice on the floor to make enemies sleep and fall, but who knows, maybe they'll added that later. Overall, I absolutely love the synergy of these mechanics. But of course, it wasn't without its issues. Since the game is in early access, the main problem, which can generally make it borderline unplayable at times, is the optimization. I wouldn't say my PC is weak by any stretch, but for some reason, tweaking the graphics or changing the resolution didn't make the game any smoother. In fact, sometimes it made the frame rate drops even lower. It feels like changing the settings just flat out doesn't work half the time. However, if you suffer through the low frame rate, die, and reload from the last checkpoint, the game magically starts running smoothly. I have no idea what the exact bottleneck is, but I can confidently say you should tweak the global illumination and shadows. That actually boosts the frame rate. There's another gameplay issue. It's not as critical as the optimization, but again, being early access, the sound design is extremely weak. In some places, it just flat out doesn't work. You'll see enemies swinging at you, their animations playing out, but there's zero audio. It can really rip you out of the immersion. But flaws aside, I'll be eagerly waiting for the final release and keeping a close eye on the project. Honestly, games like the ones I mentioned, including Fatekeeper, aren't actually bringing something entirely new to the table. It's just the cyclical nature of the trends, attempting to reinvent the wheel when everything was already established decades ago. Even the entire Souls-like genre is just a modern take on the punishing design of the 80s and 90s. And in that regard, I believe Hidetaka Miyazaki did the industry an unbelievable service by repopularizing that forgotten approach to gameplay. He was inspired by old-school games where you had zero hints and no autosaves. You got one checkpoint between levels, and to beat it, you had to actually learn the game. He took that formula, modernized it, and translated the philosophy of 2D cartridge games into 3D space. First and foremost, he proved to the corporate suits that people actively want games with pure gameplay, where cinematics and dialogue are kept to an absolute minimum, and the core loop takes center stage. He proved that the audience for this is massive, and that these modern successors to the Souls philosophy are much cheaper to produce, require lower profit margins, and inherently carry a much higher chance of actually paying off. So yes, times are undoubtedly brutal for the gaming industry right now, but man, they are incredibly interesting.